Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Anomalous Realities. We have a great show for you tonight. We've got everything from UFOs, aliens, ghosts, Ouija boards, and demons. It's going to be an interesting night. With me in the studio tonight, I have Scruffy. Scruffy, how are you doing tonight?
Oh, good, thank you.
Excellent. And of course, as always, Patrick, our producer, is in the studio with us. How have you been, Patrick?
Oh, I'm making it, Lanita. Thank you.
Awesome.
And howdy, Scruffy.
Oh, good, thank you, Patrick.
All right. As Scruffy has incidentally started work on recreating a new version of Vicky because she completely died. What would you call that? What type of program?
Well, it's more like a big filing system,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I guess.
So she just totally took a dive. She kind of
I can
ate herself
explain that.
up, and he's recreating her now. So yeah. Tonight we're gonna start with a story about a man in the Brown Mountain Lights. And if you haven't ever seen the movie, what was the name of that movie?
Alien abduction?
Yeah, Alien Abduction, which was a story that was all about the Brown Mountain Lights. And of course, obviously it was a fictional movie. However, the phenomenon around the Brown Mountain Lights has been something that has been going on for a very, very long time. People in the UFO community are very, very familiar with the Brown Mountain Lights. So we'll go over just a little bit, about the Brown Mountain Lights and the situation with Ralph. So it all started in North Carolina, the legend of the Brown Mountain Lights, long before the settlers even came in and laid claim to the area. My ancestors, the Native Americans, were reporting that something had taken up residence in the sacred mountain. On the cool fall nights, they gather at the nearby vantage points and watch as they see these large glowing orbs flying and floating around in the sky in front of the rock and hovering, lighting up, the woods and then darting around to the treetops. And the Cherokee people who had been watching this since around 1200 AD believed that they were looking at the spirits of maidens who had lost their husbands in great battles. And early frontiersmen that moved to the area had also witnessed them, the ethereal lights, and they thought them to be torches carried by the Native American warrior spirits. By the 1940s, the various legends behind the Brown Mountain Lights had morphed into campfire stories about wandering phantoms and ghostly lanterns. But the phenomena itself remained unchanged. Whatever the lights were, they were real. The phenomena had even left skeptical scientists scratching their heads. The book, The Brown Mountain Lights, describes early attempts to solve the mystery. Each of them were in vain. Here's an excerpt from the book. From Wiseman's view on Linville Mountain in the lights can be seen. They first appear like a large star coming over the mountain. Sometimes they have a reddish or bluish cast. On dark nights, they pop up so thick and fast that it's impossible to count them. The U.S. Geological Survey has conducted 2 investigations on the lights. The first was in 1913, when the conclusion was reached that the lights were locomotive headlights from the Catawba Valley south of Brown Mountain. However, 3 years later in 1916, the Great Flood swept through Catawba Valley, knocking out the railroad bridges and keeping locomotives out of the valley for weeks. The roads were also washed out and the power lines were down, but the lights continued to appear as usual, making it appear that they could not only be reflections, that they couldn't be reflections from locomotives or automobile headlights. So in 1947, reports of a strange craft crashing in the New Mexican desert began to flood in on the news wires. As flying saucers fever swept over the nation, North Carolina's anomalous lights were seen from an entirely new perspective, for probably the first time ever. From that point on, the stories of ghostly warriors and phantom lantern men were a thing of the past, and suddenly people were considering them as things from outer space. Now, on to Ralph. In the 1960s, UFO sightings in America had just reached an all-time high, and Brown Mountain's orbs weren't nearly as fantastic as the strange cases popping up all over the country, like Betty and Barney Hill, who had been abducted by aliens in their car in New Hampshire. 6 states had witnessed a flaming object from outer space crash land in Kecksburg, Pennsylvania, and police officers from Ohio were chasing flying saucers across the state lines. There was a huge surge in activity at that point in time. While all these spectacular eyewitness reports were making national news, one particularly strange account managed to fly under the radar. Someone had been abducted by the Brown Mountain Lights, and he'd even returned with evidence of his ordeal, a mummified alien body. Can you imagine?
Now, I find that a little funny there, if I might comment.
Go ahead.
How a lot of these stories do make it into media, but I think the media is a bit manipulated, if you know what I mean. Because if all these can manage to get that, and these are just simple light reportings and police going after something that can't be fully explained, how does a man not only claiming to have an encounter with a Brown Mountain Light, and God knows news reporters and crap will go all over that to get their face on TV or in an article, but how does this man go unnoticed, not only saying that he got abducted, but also legitimately, if this is right, bringing back a mummified body?
You know, I think at that point in time, the government really didn't know what to do about this, and so
That's a good point.
they were, they really were in this. This goes back kind of to your grandmother, but they really were. They weren't sure as to what to do because they were new to the phenomenon. I don't think they had had a lot of meetings with the extraterrestrials at that point in time. They didn't know what to think of them. They didn't know how to deal with them. And they probably wanted to keep things on the down low as much as possible to keep people from panicking because they really didn't know what they were dealing with yet. And they didn't know how to deal with things. Like in the situation with Roswell, you know, when the Roswell crash happened, they really didn't have a set way of doing things and how they were going to deal with the bodies that were left over from the crash. So they had them just laying out on slabs in a hangar until they were transported because nobody knew what to do with them. There was nothing set in place to deal with them yet. This is just indicative of what was going on at that time. So people could literally, well, if they had the military clearance, come into the hangar where the bodies were, and they would see them sitting there on this table and wonder what the heck they were. Nobody knew what to do. Nobody knew that they shouldn't be, you know, letting other people see it. Nobody knew. Later on, they were told to keep their mouths shut about it. But at the time, nothing was really kept quiet immediately. There was nothing set in place saying this is what you do because there hadn't been enough things happen yet that they had set down the rules as to how it was going to be handled. So, yeah. So going back to the story, for most of his life, Ralph was an unassuming furniture salesman in Hickory, North Carolina. His most thrilling adventure was a run for Congress in 1948. But in 1961, he had heard talk of the mysterious Brown Mountain Lights, and he decided to go investigate the reports for himself. After several expeditions into the mountains, he, like frontiersmen before him and the Native Americans before them, witnessed the glowing orbs traversing the forest. A quote, "I'm frightened, don't know what to do," he wrote about his sighting. "One light moves forward. It's now about 10 feet from me and is glowing. I could read the newspaper by the shining of it, which means it was that bright." Lale goes on to describe the light in great detail. "It is 10 to 12 feet across, almost a perfect circle. It has a brown center that does not look solid. The shape of the brown center is like a tumblebug, but without the head standing on its back end. Not touching the ground, but suspended in the center of a glowing ball. It seems to have 3 hands or feelers protruding out on each side." It almost sounds like he's describing a being of some kind, doesn't it?
That's an interesting analogy. That does sound a little interesting. I mean, let's read on and see more in
Well,
detail.
this is the part where Lael's experience takes a different turn than most of the others who came face to face with the lights. As he watches the object hover nearby, he begins to feel strange, numbing sensation washing over his body, a feeling that he described as being scanned. Shortly after that, the glowing orb goes back about its business, slowly drifting off to the trees. Rather than turning and running to safety, he wrote that he felt compelled to follow it into the forest. After chasing the light through the valley, he watches it dart into a cave emerging from the base of Brown Mountain. As he creeps inside, he watches a boulder slide open, allowing the light to pass through. Before a strange doorway closed, he slipped through and found himself in a labyrinth of shimmering crystalline tunnels that had been carved with laser accuracy. In the distance, he could see the glow of a bright light. So he's saying that these things are going in and out of the mountain, just like the natives said that they were going in and out of the mountain.
Mm-hmm.
So that's very interesting, and the reason people haven't found it, I mean, if this chamber doorway slides open and closed, it's probably some sort of a technology that humans can't get it to slide open.
I guess
I'm
you're not
sure.
gonna find out on Google Maps anytime soon.
I don't know. You can find a lot of things on Google Maps.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
There's been some pretty extraordinary things.
There's been some really weird things on Google Maps. Have you ever gone hunting on Google Maps, Patrick? Because I'll tell you, you can find some of the weirdest things on Google Maps.
I've poked around on them. That and MapQuest both are pretty good. I wasn't just looking, and I wasn't looking long or hard enough to just come up with something accidentally and very neat and odd. I like to pore over an atlas like a Rand McNally. I'm a big map reader. But otherwise, I think I'd need to do it some more before I could really talk to you on that level about it.
I know I've found some very interesting things. There's actually some areas where it seems like there's just giant holes in the planet. In a place or two, there are strange drawings in the earth that people, I mean, this is not even, the ones that people know of. There are ones that, it's never been talked about, but if you find the spot on Google, on Google Earth, you can see these strange patterns that obviously are man-made somehow or something made.
There's that huge, I don't know if this is on Google Maps or not, but it's in. I find it because it's going around the net, and if I've seen it, you've probably seen it too. But I think it's in southern Canada. But it's like the profile of First Nations.
I actually have seen it before it went around the internet. I actually found that when I was exploring
See?
once. I actually just happened across it, and I was like, "Gosh, that's really strange,"
Uh-huh.
But yeah, that's definitely one of those that I was mentioning, and that was years and years ago, back when Google Earth was kind of just a new thing. So I spent a lot of time on there looking at all different things, and it's amazing the things you find. There's a part on Antarctica which is full of like red. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's some sort of iron deposits or something that have turned into rust, but it looks. You ever seen the Stephen King adaptation movie for Dreamcatcher? That infection, the virus that people get infected with, is this red kind of stuff. It looks a lot like that. So it was a little freaky when I saw that, having seen the Stephen King movie. And I absolutely love that movie.
No.
But yeah, it was very, very weird because there's patches of this red. It looks like the snow is red there in some spots, and it's very weird.
I do remember seeing, and I think they've removed it, and it's on the border of the Atlantic. It's off Portugal, and it's that tremendous square. It's like 60 or 100 miles square, and then it has
Wow.
huge.
Just blacked out.
It is now, but when you could look at it, it was truly amazing, and it was just a tremendous sized. It looked like a city.
Really?
Well, I mean, there were no buildings to see, but it looks, it's not natural for one thing, and the other, it's laid out in squares.
Very interesting.
huge city, and it's well, a couple hundred miles off the coast of Portugal, and probably under a mile of
Huh.
water now.
Wonder if that's Atlantis.
Be part of it.
Could be. Could be. All right, I suppose we'll go back to the story now. Okay, so back to Ralph. He goes inside into these caves, and he could see the glow of a bright light. Upon reaching the light source, he found himself in a massive chamber where he heard a voice address him. It appeared to be coming from the orb he'd followed into the cave. Once again, sounds like a living thing. Do not fear, there is no danger here. So Ralph sat down in a seat that had been provided, and the voice proceeded to introduce itself as a gas-based life form from the planet Venus. How interesting is that?
Now that is
Venus.
That isn't the first time that I've heard of a life form from Venus. If you remember back, there was the story of Valiant Thor, who was the visitor to the Pentagon back in the 1960s, I believe it was, around the same time as all of the hubbub over UFOs and flying saucers. He was human looking, though. Not to say that there's not gas-based life forms there, but he had actually attempted to share technology with humanity to help save us, because they could see that we were already starting to go down a bad path as far as damage to the earth because of fossil fuels and things like that. And he tried to help us, but they said no to his help because it would be bad for their economy. It would change life as we know it, and their system of money would fall apart if they did this.
And God knows they can't let go of this system of money.
Exactly. So they sent Valiant Thor saying, thanks, but no thanks, and sent him packing. That's how the story goes about Valiant Thor. But he said that he was from Venus, and he always claimed to be that the human life or humanish life there existed below the surface of the planet. So that is how life existed on Venus, according to him. Like in our form life could exist there, is because it was very, very deep in towards the planet core.
Well, this thing about 900 degrees is a total fable from what I have heard, which doesn't amount to much, but that's what I got. They were just trying to think up, some qualities to the planet, this, that, and the other. And then someone said, oh, yeah, and it's going to be 900 degrees on the surface, which is sheer impossibility if you consider some of the stuff the Russians have managed to parachute in. They'd have cooked, but they didn't.
Well, when they came up with that temperature, I'm not even sure how they came up with the number. I mean, all the things, there's been so many things that we have thought that we knew, that we believed that we could understand about things, that was proven wrong later. Things are often proven wrong about what we think we know about other worlds and just the nature of, the universe outside of us. We keep making these
life forms, organisms, and environmental things, requirements for them to adapt or live. And as I'd like to say personally, I mean, I've read up on several articles where they say we have the golden zone, the green zone, perfect for life, which I think it's a pretty peak point for life. I mean, we've got a great alignment in our solar system. The sun is the right radius. It gives us what would be probably the best for, I'd say, for Homo sapiens to develop. But here we can absorb different types of germs or much smaller organisms or even some different types of bacteria that can survive in Antarctica or in different areas that is extremely cold. And we were recently discovering, which volcano was that? I'm having a hard time with that. I'd have to Wikipedia it or do a search for that. Thank you, Wikipedia. I'd have to do a search for that. But there are apparently been found several organisms that can not only live within the enormous heats of above lava, being next to lava flows, but also possibly inside of lava. So I think we're a little... We don't tend to think too far unless we've got a R.L. Stein book to read or a Steven Spielberg movie about a space odyssey involving aliens of some kind, because I think we have a really nice environment, but I think there's a lot more organisms, different types of bacteriums, and much more single-celled organisms based life that can expand its wide variety of living
Hmm.
in environments. Many not even needing oxygen.
Well, that's the thing. I think humanity tries to put a packaging on life based on our form of life and what we know of life. And scientists oftentimes really just kind of reject any type of organism that goes beyond what we understand as just an impossibility until now they're being proven wrong. Especially when they're finding it on their own planet. And it's forcing them to face the fact that what they thought they knew wasn't exactly right.
One of mankind's biggest problems is his brain. It's a
Yeah, I
wondrous
know.
thing. It's a wondrous thing, but it can be a real problem child too.
I think the ego is a bigger problem child than the brain
There's
itself.
no argument there.
Yep.
I think it's also the insecurity to have a need for an explanation.
Hmm.
And that kind of, I think, forces the hand of a lot of people to theorize their own concept or subject on a matter that they can't fully understand
That's
and jump to conclusions that won't fully make sense but is accepted.
that's astute indeed, Scruffy. I'm free from that, thank heavens. I don't have a need for an explanation. I can.
I'm happy to be talking to someone open minded then.
My brain fell out a long time ago. I,
That's what happens when it's a little too open.
yeah,
It's hard
right.
to keep it in. Um, okay, let's go back to Ralph.
Yeah.
So he was introduced to this being introduced itself as a gas-based life form from the planet Venus. It shared with him the secret of mankind that humans had not developed on Earth, but instead we come from the planet Pewam, as they call it, which was destroyed in a terrible accident that involves the splitting of an electron. The booming voice warned Lael that humanity was nearing a point in their evolution where they might make the same mistake again. It was up to Lael to warn humanity of the danger they were in, and if he failed, the Venusians would have no choice but to destroy man for the good of the planet. Well, that's interesting.
Also, is the word again. That kind of gives
Hmm.
away a bit there.
Well, apparently we were on a different world to begin with, and we destroyed it because we got too big for our britches. I'm surprised they haven't done anything, yet. Lael was told to go on his way, though, and if he could keep his mouth shut about the secret cave entrance, he'd be allowed to return and be rewarded with even more secrets of the universe. Several weeks later, Ralph made a second trip to the cave, where he was again met by the mysterious glowing light. The familiar numbing sensation washed over him when he approached the cave, and the booming voice again greeted him and said, "Welcome, friend." By keeping the location of the cave a secret, Ralph had passed the voice's test, and it offered him the opportunity of a lifetime in return. If he wished, the Venusians would allow him to enter one of the crafts they stored inside the mountain, where safely, inside the ship, he could be transported to their home planet of Venus. He agreed to the trip without hesitation, and with the floating orb as his companion, he climbed into the machine and was fired off to the stars at light speed. How exciting is that?
That's very exciting.
Can you imagine? I wouldn't say no either, I don't think. I mean, I think you'd take a moment just to think, what if they're not on the up and up? But I think the opportunity is just too big and once in a lifetime to pass up. I don't think I could possibly pass up
Curiosity
that.
kills a cat.
It does, but what an adventure.
Yeah, when I
I,
was 9 years old or so, I had read George Adamski's books, Inside the Spaceships, and the other one too. And I was, I don't know how these two tie in with each other, but
I don't know. That'd be interesting to find out. On the subject of Adamski, there was I don't know if
they
this
were
is the
from
fellow
Venus
who
too, apparently.
I don't know if it's the fellow who wrote the book, but there was a fellow who had by that last name who had taken a few UFO photos think it was the late 70s, early 80s. What I found curious was that I happened across one of the photos and a video, I think, also that his wife had uploaded, that it was actually very similar to one of the UFOs that I had seen a few years back with my son and my mother-in-law. It was like a white cylinder, but it was upright, not like laying horizontally, but vertical.
Mhm.
So it looked like, I don't even know. It was like a big white tube in the sky, just stationary. Um, and the thing that he had caught looked like that too. And the thing that we had seen just sat there for the longest time.
Well, that would fit the description of a mothership, and then he also had very intricate diagrams of the quote unquote scout ships.
Very interesting. Yeah.
The three balls
Um,
on the bottom.
hmm.
Okay, go on.
Yeah, I was also gonna say, that one that I saw, the white one, the cylinder, was actually seen about 45 miles south of where we live by someone else. Because immediately when it happened, I got on abovetopsecret.com and shared with everyone what had happened, and there were some other people on the website that lived in my area and had said that his wife had actually told him about the same thing, that she was looking north from where they were and she saw the same thing. So I was not alone in that day. So that is always comforting when you have other witnessers.
Yeah,
So
yeah, it
yeah.
is. And then they saw one over my hometown, a cigar ship.
Well, was that one vertical or horizontal?
It was in the normal horizontal.
Horizontal, yeah, like a
But
cigar. Yeah.
it doesn't make a big difference to me. Uh,
Right.
it'd be the same thing. There's probably a reason for it being vertical or horizontal, but it's probably the same thing. That's my first thought on it.
Yeah. Probably. I think they have different functions, the different types of ships. Um, Okay, we'll go back to Ralph now, Mr. Leo. He was greeted when he got to the destination by a group of friendly Venusians. They looked a bit like humans did, going back to what I was saying about there being humanoids on Venus, but more beautiful in every way. As the aliens crowded around their visitor, eager to study their new friend from planet Earth, Leo noticed that they were all male. As he scanned the crowd, his eyes caught a glimpse of a voluptuous figure in the distance. There, watching the commotion, was one of the most beautiful women he had ever laid his eyes on, as he calls it, a woman. Obviously, she was a Venusian. She was hypnotizing. Once the native men had finished poking and prodding him, he rushed to the gorgeous alien woman and showered her with compliments. He's had some poking and prodding on mind as well, apparently, as it would happen. She took him up on the offer, apparently. So he's saying that he had relations with the Venusian woman.
Oh, how nice.
Hmm. As the crowd looked on, the woman led Ralph to a quiet room where the two of them had a very fun time. um, when that was over, the Venusian gave Leo a tour of their society, taught him about their culture, revealed that there were many more beings among the stars, and then they revoked his intergalactic passport and stuffed him back into the spacecraft and shipped him back to Earth. Hmm.
Oh,
When he returned from his space adventure, he was reminded to spread the word about the dangers of electron splitting and ushered back through the mountain caves. Along the way, he discovered the mummified body of a small humanoid creature. It was only a few feet tall, had a large round head, and lanky arms that were nearly the length of its body. Sounds kind of like a gray. When Ralph inquired about the dead being, the glowing orb replied that he was free to remove it as it would serve as proof of his journey. So this is
Well, that's
where,
awful. You can't deny.
yeah, I suppose, kind of strange. Um, so the entire trip had taken Ralph only 8 hours, and soon he found himself back in the forest at the base of the mountain, with the body of an alien body in his arms. He rushed home to write down the details of his discovery. A few years later, he published The Brown Mountain Lights, a book that documented the whole of his incredible story, from his field research on the mountain to the discovery of an alien cave base. to his experiences with the Venusian woman. Every detail was accounted for. As for the body of the dead creature, Ralph placed it in a glass case and draped a blanket over its lower body, leaving its large head with a row of tiny teeth clearly visible, and displayed it in his store. Before long, his bizarre specimen began to attract the attention of ufologists who had come from all over the country to study the mummy itself, and when they questioned about its authenticity, Ralph stuck by his story, swearing that his tale, however unbelievable, was true. Obviously, a discovery like this was bound to catch the attention of the powers that be, and before long, Ralph claimed that he was being harassed by government agents who were investigating the Brown Mountain area. These agents were approaching visiting UFO investigators who had come to the area to do their own research. Some believe that none other than the notorious Men in Black were there. A veteran researcher of UFO phenomenon, Alan Greenfield, shared with the following story of his investigations of the Brown Mountains in the 70s. Let's see. One of my visits to Brown Mountain, frankly, I don't remember which one. This nicely dressed guy supposedly came to my hotel room for no apparent reason other than to warn me that Lael was a local moonshiner. At the time, it seemed very normal, if a bit unexpected. He identified himself, but his name disappeared from my memory. It was probably my poking around in the rural area that brought him to me, to uphold local pride or whatever, but who knows? Maybe he was a man in black, a thought that didn't strike me until years later. He knew where I was, what I was there for, and wanted to, in some fashion, discredit the local contactee. The primary phenomenon, the Brown Mountain Lights, is real, whatever that may mean. So these kind of reports became commonplace among the local investigators, particularly the ones who'd started talking with Ralph and showing interest in his extraterrestrial mummy. As ufologists were harassed by the Men in Black, Ralph's reputation was publicly dragged through the mud. This happens pretty much any time you get somebody who's trying to tell the truth. That's what happens. They try to discredit you in any way possible, so people will not listen to you and won't believe you. I wouldn't be surprised if it happened to me someday. On a regular basis, the well-dressed men would allegedly come into Lael's shop and declare that the mummy was nothing more than a sideshow gaff before quietly offering ridiculous sums of money to purchase the body. Ralph refused their offers. On June 30th of 1978, Ralph died at the age of 69. Shortly after his death, his shop was bulldozed to the ground, and his tale of Venusians and alien cave bases was all but forgotten. And so was the body of the dead alien he'd kept locked in the shop for the decade. To this day, no one knows what happened to the extraterrestrial mummy. The body simply disappeared. In the final years of Ralph's life, Ralph offered up highly entertaining tale of extraterrestrial adventures, complete with proof. But how much of his story could possibly be true? We'll never know. So now the question is, what happened to the body? The site was bulldozed. I'd have to wonder who was responsible for bulldozing the site and what happened to the mummy. I think research should be done to find out who, precisely who was the one that was responsible for his remains and his possessions and things. Did he leave a will? Was it left to someone? Did he have any family? It sounds like he was a single man. So I think a lot more details need to be surfaced on this story as to, what the possible reasons could be for the store being destroyed and the mummy being removed and never seen again. It's very, very strange. I don't know.
Now, quick question. Anywhere in the article did it say, like, when they bulldozed down the shop or store place, did they build anything over? Did it say that anywhere? Because I don't believe I heard that.
Yeah, I don't know. I'll bet
wondered.
you anything that there is something else there.
I found it strange because if, I mean, they bulldozed that and didn't decide to build anything over that, then I think that's kind of a way of getting rid of evidence or
I
any.
think that something would still be. I think no matter what, they would have to rebuild over a shop because it's usually a shop is going to be in a main town area, so they're going to build something else over it, I'm sure. Hmm. I don't know.
Hmm.
We know that I mean, the one thing we know is that, the phenomena is real. It's been going on for a very, very long time. Um, the government men, the men in black, they've been around for a long time too. There have been countless witnesses. Anytime, especially during that era, that someone had a UFO experience, they were often approached by these men in black who often would tell them that, whatever they saw, wasn't what they thought it was, keep your mouth shut. Um, Basically, things to that extent. Just telling people that, either you didn't see what you saw, or if you did see it, you better not talk about it, which is government 101 in my
Yeah.
opinion.
Yeah, I would think if it's really that serious, some people may think, oh, why don't they just take them out or get rid of them permanently and not leave anything behind? If it was really something to hide, they would take care of the problem. But I think what some people don't realize by suggesting that, I mean, it's not that simple. I mean, sure, they can make people disappear, but it kind of has to be a controlled number because it's not like a celebrity can just go missing, no one would notice. Now, people aren't nearly as popular as celebrities, but enough people going missing, and there tends to be actually a decent number of visitors that like to go check out the Black Mailbox, Area 51, or go to Brown Mountain for whether it be camping or to see these famous lights. But if these people simply disappeared, sooner or later there would be a piling of cases, and it would become obvious after several of these encounters it would I think people would start to get on to their government or the supposed men in black. I'm sure with enough cases disappearing there would be soon be a war of possible evidence coming from left behind phones or cameras or small documents or writings. So I think it's really a 101 in their book to highly insist that people keep their mouths shut.
Yep, yep. That's kind of their whole modus operandi. So as a follow-up, there's an investigator, Greg Newkirk. He writes for Week in Weird. Um, that's he said he was approached during his time in North Carolina. Wasn't yet aware of the Brown Mountain would play a part in one of the strangest investigations that he had ever encountered. In 2013, a man from eastern Kentucky contacted him about frightening encounters with a group of 4 foot tall creatures that were coming from mine shafts and terrorizing his family. He began to make plans to visit the home of this person and document the disturbances and hopefully get some evidence of the creatures. But he never made it that far because after just a handful of emails, the man mysteriously ceased to talk to him. But not before sending along pictures of the creatures and their strange 3-toed footprints that they left behind. Okay. Um, these are drawings, not photos, but the footprint is an actual photo. Um, the circumstances that surrounded his encounters with, as he referred to them as the little men, um, as well as his descriptions of the creatures as 4 foot tall beings with round heads and long lanky arms, bore the striking similarities to the case that occurred with Ralph Lale, um, which was commonly referred to as the Hopkinsville Goblin Incident.
I remember
Um,
that well.
yeah. um, and so he hadn't yet made the connection, even after all of this, between Ralph's mummy and the research of the new Goblin case yet. But in the emails from the man, there was a mention that a mutual friend by the name of Terry Rist had given him contact information, and he didn't know who this person was. So he didn't know how they had his contact information. So he started digging and could pull up only one source for the name, which was a pseudonym used by an ex-military occultist, interviewed in two obscure books printed in the mid-90s titled The Secret Cipher of the UFO Knots and The Secret Rituals of the Men in Black. These particular books are about as fringe as you can get when it comes to ufology, with instructions on contacting ultra-terrestrials via occult rituals supposedly deciphered by Aleister Crowley himself. Now, that's an interesting point because Crowley actually did claim to be in contact with ultra-terrestrial beings, which were actually kind of more extra-dimensional beings. And curiously, he had actually drawn a picture of this being that he had contact with, and it did look similar to your typical alien-looking creature. Going back to the story, it says, here's the strange part. The interviews dealt heavily with the secret cave bases and the special forces sent to maintain them. So at some point, the government got involved in the cave bases, which is not at all surprising because they've done that so much in the past. Take Phil Schneider, for example, with the Dulce base and what happened to him, that poor man. Do you have something to say, Scruffy?
Not really. Just listening.
All right. Rist had claimed that he had been a member of one of these teams formed of grizzled Vietnam veterans. They were tasked with kicking extraterrestrials' assets in an alien cave base located at the base of Brown Mountain. The coincidental connections to dozens of other strange cases just kept piling up. And the more he looked into it, the more it appeared that people throughout the area had been reporting run-ins with these same creatures for a long time. They were given all sorts of names: Tommyknockers, Gobsows, Puckwudgies, Kentucky Goblins, all different names for the exact same thing. So could the extraterrestrial mummy that Lael had found of Brown Mountain have been the body of one of these cave-dwelling creatures?
He would have seen 3 toes on it, wouldn't he?
Yeah, I don't know. That was never said. And, if you remember, they said that he had the body covered up from like the waist down. So would you have seen the 3 toes the way he had the body displayed? You wouldn't have seen 3 toes if they were 3-toed.
Yeah, but before that, he might have noticed it and maybe noted it down somewhere.
Yeah, that's nowhere in the story. This is definitely one of those things that I'm going to have to do a little bit of my own research on, because there's a good amount of information, but I have so many questions that they're not really covered here.
Right. It just leaves you with more questions than answers.
Mm-hmm.
The hands themselves, would they have been only a thumb and 3 digits, or a thumb and 2 digits if it was 3 toes?
Interesting. Let's see. Okay, going back to the article, it says that although you can make a pretty strong case for finding some truth in Lael's alien adventure, the hardest part of his tale to reconcile is the idea that an advanced race from Venus was dying to get into intimate relations with a salesman from Earth. As he writes it, he couldn't even type the words without laughing. But there may be a reasonable explanation. Most of Lael's experience happened in his own head, according to him. I'm not talking about a deliberate work of fiction, but those who followed UFO reports for long enough, and cases of alien abduction in particular, are familiar with the false memory phenomenon. It has a habit of rearing its head into contactee reports. So I think what he's suggesting is that they put false memories into his head. Now, why they would put into his head a memory of having relations with one of the females of their species, I don't know.
Or a memory of seeing no females at all, which is odd on the face of it.
Yeah, definitely. While other abductees would encounter, giant space bugs or tall whites or the popular grays, he sees these humanoid Venusians. if you go deeper down the false memory rabbit hole, you could argue that Ralph was simply experiencing the phenomena as it chose to present itself at the time, which is a good point. I mean, much like, the old stories of fairies, demons, now they're extraterrestrials, they're tricksters, changelings throughout history. You never really know what you can trust when you're dealing with creatures of this type, because they have the ability, especially those that have psychic ability that can actually talk to you, you know, in your
Telepathically.
mind. Yes, telepathically. If they can communicate with your mind, perhaps they can transmit images to your mind, which they give people visions all the time. They may actually be changing how you see them as well. So they may be giving you false visions of what they actually look like, or, their nature when you interact with them. I think that's not only possible, but most likely probable, just for the sake of not scaring people too awful badly. Although I don't know why they choose some of the forms they choose, if that were the case.
Well, here's a concept to consider.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it might actually be the individual, because a lot of these encounters do tend to depict, as you explained a little bit ago, tend to be the Greys, but in his story it was these
Round-headed.
Venuses and round-headed
Mm-hmm.
humanoids.
Yeah.
Maybe it's morely what the contactee is more comfortable with in
Yeah.
comprehending it. Because if you had a solid point there, it's not like they just want to scare them off. Because, I mean,
Right.
facing the truth, for all we know, these could look like giant fleas. And no one,
But
everyone
I
would
mean,
be
it's
scared of
possible.
that.
Yeah.
So having it be manipulated to whatever he wants to perceive, then I guess it'd be easier for him to accept, which would make sense.
Yeah. So then they make it look like a really hot Earth woman.
If that's what he
If
wants.
that's what he wants to see, that's what they'll give him, I suppose. That's interesting. They say a side effect of the false memory is that if the contactee dares to share them with the world, they'll instantly look like a complete nut, publicly discrediting themselves in the process. The scientific community wouldn't touch the case with a 10-foot pole. And for that matter, neither would most UFO researchers, especially when he says he got down and dirty with this extraterrestrial woman. So by implanting the crazy memory, not only have they concealed the truth, but they've also tainted the evidence. So it's a win-win for whoever they might be. So I guess the question is did Ralph encounter the source of the Brown Mountain Lights? Did he truly possess the corpse of one of the alien creatures?
Or a real alien in general.
Or just another alien? Yeah, because it seems like he encountered, three different types of creatures during the course of this time. The gas-like,
humanoids, the gas,
and then the
being, and then-
round-headed ones with the long arms,
Mhm.
which are more like the traditional beings that people usually witness. Makes you wonder, it makes you wonder a lot, honestly. We could speculate all day about what really happened, but the truth is that we're never going to know for sure. We can't sit down with the guy anymore because he's passed away,
Yeah.
Not till we find that door and get it open.
Now that's an interesting thing.
That
Who is brave enough, though, to go looking for that door?
Good.
That's a good question.
It's just so big. I mean, go all around. It's got to be somewhere there.
Just offhand,
Mhm.
I'd say that I probably would.
I know you
But I
probably
mean,
would.
that's something that I think several people would say. But if you really think in depth, I mean, if I actually had the moment to do it, I hate to say it, and I really do, but I probably wouldn't, due to the fact,
There's a
you can't-
danger factor there.
Exactly. You can't just assume that this story could be 100% of the experience. This could be of what he just experienced. We don't know how they could react to different individuals. It could be that his soul, let's go to that concept for a second. His soul is a higher enlightened one with experience and understanding, and that could be why he was more prone to its friendliness. But anyone that might be a bit on the negative side might not be welcome so friendly. Needless to say, we don't. I mean, you have to factor in a lot of things. I mean, for people who have family and siblings and things like that, I think it'd be just too much of a risk. Although I sure as hell would take evidence and photos.
Bachelors wanted.
Mm-hmm.
Nope. That would be that'd be awful tempting though. That would be
Yes,
very
yes.
tempting. If you
Nonetheless, it
were
would
if you
be.
were to happen across it, not going in the tunnel would be very, very difficult, I think.
How would you go about it, Patrick?
Mm. Well, just maybe take a couple of trusted friends and enough gear, and then just start poking around. He didn't leave any. You see, the terrain is going to be varied. It's not just going to be the edge of the
Hmm.
mountain coming off of a convenient floor of land. So you're going to have to use some eyes, and it's probably concealed. And so many years ago, many things could have grown, and so it would take maybe dowsing rods, uh, all kind of things, pendulum.
Yeah. I think I'd want to get some more information about where exactly, he was when he discovered the lights and the entranceway. And I think you would need to be very selective with who you take with you and make sure that the person that you take with you is someone that you feel in your heart wouldn't be an aggressive person, because I think that is the one thing that would prevent you from getting into that mountain.
Right, right. And also, start with where he was. What what
Yeah.
what town was he in? Now go from there and see what you come up with.
Yep. I think I'm thinking somewhere it did explain where he was at the time. Just see if I can find that real quick.
Well, she scans for the location. I guess I'll make a quick note on what you said earlier. Now, it's that type of embodiment of ideas and your thoughtful exploration for that tunnel or cave that could very well change the course of history. I mean, if someone actually managed to, if we could manage to get more than one eyewitness to this case, now I'm not assuming that we're going to see a three-breast alien, which, if I might mention, sounds like a really bad B movie, but if we could manage to get people who can actually prove its existence, assuming that you actually got in there with a group of people with this setup to know where you're going, hooks, chains, things to link you from the outside to the inside. I think this could very well, if anyone could actually manage to do something like that, would inspire a generation of people to be much more open-minded to their thought processes and how they go about thinking of these events. Because on firsthand, way Lanita said how it's a win-win for the species, and if it was said scientists wouldn't touch a story with a 10-foot pole, what have you, but I mean it's a bit of a fail if you say that type of story. I mean openly, it sounds really far-fetched, and to a normal person that has none of that experience or ever considered that type of concept, it would be immediately rejected and made fun of. But people who could learn of these events, being the exploration of that cave and actually becoming more known and a higher chance of it being true due to how many people might have had the encounter, could definitely change the normality on the subject.
Good point.
Yeah, I'm the last person to go screaming Eureka, and
Well,
it
uh,
that's an off the cuff answer. It's something I would give a lot of thought to before I proceeded, and with regard to equipment and people and stuff. And then,
Oh
of
yes,
course,
definitely.
I would get in touch with Mark Eddy and Ahmed Painter,
yeah.
because their show is the one that deals with all the anomalous stuff on Turtle Island
Aha. Okay.
on Monday nights, and they get some
Cool.
very interesting guests.
Awesome. Okay, so for those who are interested, he was in the Linville Gorge area, which is near Marion, North Carolina. It's a large part and it's a very foresty area. So here's the thing, you're going to take a little bit of a risk if you go in that area, because cell service is not going to be good. Going back to um, the alien abduction movie. That was one of their problems, is they
Yeah.
got to a point and there was no cell service, which is perfect when you're dealing with something of this kind, because they don't want people to be able to call for help.
No,
So
more the camera itself.
Yeah, it's a strategic location.
it is indeed.
Oh, go
And with
away.
that, we will be back after the break. Thank you everyone for listening. And we will be back with Wingman too. Welcome back, everyone. We have Wingman in the studio with us now, but first I would like to let Patrick do our weekly shout out to the studio and fundraising.
Hi.
Patrick? Yes.
Yeah, this is Patrick English, and you're listening to Freedom Slips at revolutionradio.com. We are the biggest user-supported, listener-supported internet station in the world. We've been here 5 years, and we're doing pretty well. We have over 90 hosts now. And in order for this to keep happening, we need your help. We need $26.50 a month. And this has gone up, but it had to do with some of the server issues and the server provider issues. I can't get into it, not because it's a secret. I just don't remember all the details. And I don't want to bore you, but nonetheless, things cost, and they have a habit of doing that, going up. But still, we love doing this. We do it for you. We don't get paid for it. And if the chat room is any indication of a microcosm of a greater macrocosm of listeners, there's a lot of good people here. We seem to attract the best. And because of that, I think we've got a really good thing going. And let's keep it going. Please donate what you can, 5, 10, on up to you. There are the archives, $4.99 a month. There is the seed pack, which is at $100, and you get a tremendous amount of seeds, all non-GMO, all what is the word? They're heirloom seeds, which means they just continue to produce seeds forever. No hybrids. Hybrids are good, but they don't produce for a long time. Hybrids are a good fiddling around with plants, while GMO, of course, is not. And also, we have the Bullet Drive, and it's $15, and we have the Zazzle store. And that's all available for your delectation off of the home page. So please go have a look. Please help us out. And with that, I will turn the show over to our host, Shaman Lanita Elder.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Guys, I come back with a very, very heavy heart. I just came across, as we were in the break, I checked my Facebook, and Nick Pope shared the news that Edgar Mitchell, who is one of the Apollo 14 astronauts, has died. He wasn't just an astronaut, but he was also a big supporter of the disclosure movement. He did so much to try to help bring the truth to the forefront, and he has passed away. And my thoughts and prayers go to his family and his loved ones in this time. And I just hope they all make it through okay. What a blow, I mean, crazy. We were just talking about, the Brown Mountain Lights and the UFO phenomenon, and then to find out, that he's passed. Apparently he passed yesterday, on the eve of his 45th anniversary of his lunar landing, which took place on February 5th, 1971.
Allegedly.
Really? We gotta go there, Wingman.
So I'm not much of a wingman when I go AWOL. Sorry about that. I got carried away.
All right.
I got carried away looking at laser diodes. So I want to build a laser, and there's a new one out, 6 watts, very powerful.
So you're gonna build a laser, huh?
Yeah, and my mind just got distracted, and before I knew it, I looked at the clock and the penny dropped. So yeah, Edgar Mitchell, exactly, allegedly on the moon. But it's a shame he didn't come forward and just say outright it was a hoax. I know he was in favour of the disclosure aspect of things, but it would have been nice if he just came out. But then he would
Well,
have
he
been
did.
discredited.
He did make statements like he has said, yes, there have been crashed craft and bodies recovered. We are not alone in the universe. They have been coming here for a long time. So he did make these statements. He also said, I happen to be privileged enough to be in on the fact that we have been visited on this planet and the UFO phenomenon is real. So the man did take a stand. He did
Right.
take a stand.
It's
Go
funny. I
ahead.
remember seeing one video of a guy, and he approached at various times all three of the astronauts that went on the Apollo 11 mission, and asked them to swear in the Bible that they landed on the moon, and they refused to do it, which was
Okay.
quite interesting, I thought.
My only overawing question is this, because I am sure that the movie we saw was filmed, though the landing could have been actual. I can buy that much. However, what I want to know is how did they get the landing module back to meet up with the orbiter?
Very, very good question. Very good question.
And also, with regards to perspective, our perspective of the moon, even especially with the blood moon, it looks quite large. So, respectively, if a picture is taken of Earth from the moon, the Earth should look much bigger than how we see the moon at night, and yet the Earth always appears really small in the pictures. Have you noticed that?
Well, with regard to the moon looking large, it always looks large on the horizon, yet not when it starts mounting into the sky. And the reason for that is atmospheric lensing, because you're looking through layers and layers and layers of atmosphere, which turn into like a magnifying glass.
Ah.
The moon doesn't
Allegedly.
have atmosphere, though, does it? And there were no stars in any of the photos that were taken on the moon.
No.
Much like my local pub doesn't have much of an atmosphere, but that's another story. So you see what I'm saying. So the moon should appear considerably bigger than how we see them. Sorry, the Earth from the moon should look considered, because the Earth is what, 4 or 5 times bigger than the moon, or maybe even more. I don't know the exact
Yeah,
number.
probably more than that, actually.
Yeah,
So it should
uh,
appear
hang on.
quite large in the pictures.
Yeah, one would think so. One would think so, but you got to be careful when you say things like that, because then you get the people with the flat Earth thing going, and then they start freaking out and saying, there's no real pictures of the Earth; they're all fake. And I don't even want to go there, because I don't even understand how they
Don't
can
wanna
think
tell
that
us
it's
how
not,
cool.
round.
Well, that's one of the reasons I was looking into getting the laser. Actually, I wanted to do an experiment to put an end to this, or to certainly add something
All
to the
that.
of a laser, set, and then a mirror a mile away, a strong laser mirror a mile away. Now, if I level that with a spirit level, the laser exactly, then that it should reflect back on itself at the other end, a mile away on this mirror, right? So I thought that would be a good experiment. But one of the questions I have about the moon that I've not really heard asked much, I can't remember if I've mentioned this before, is how come the face of the moon that we see is potted with so-called holes, meteor strike holes, or dips or dimples, if you like. Because if you think about it, if a meteor is going to hit that face of that side of the moon, then it would have to kind of go around Earth and then do a 45-degree turn and then hit the moon, because the Earth is in the way of anything hitting the moon. And yet here we see a face of the moon, and it's pitted with lots of holes everywhere.
Well, I think there's a reason for that. And, one of the things that I've talked about before is that there's been theory, and it actually goes back to really old, way old. The moon wasn't always there, according to very ancient cultures. So the moon wasn't always there. And there are those that believe that the moon was actually put there as a protection, but also kind of like the Death Star as a base for extraterrestrials. But beyond that, I think the moon serves as a gravitational protection for the Earth from large asteroid strikes. So instead of hitting us, they hit the moon.
Yeah, see, I don't buy that. I don't buy that because its gravitational pull compared to the Earth is a lot weaker. So I
No,
don't
but
really
they
buy.
go through it first. So if they're going to get yanked in, they get yanked in there first.
Well, I guess it depends on the trajectory. Obviously, if the moon's on the other
Hmm.
side of the Earth and yeah,
Obviously, we still get hit by things. We just don't get hit by as much as I think we would if, obviously, as we would if the moon weren't there, because the moon takes a lot of hits, and it's obviously taking the hits that, if it weren't there, would be hitting us. I mean, there's no two ways about it. If all these things are hitting the moon, um, if they
yeah,
hadn't
but
hit the moon, they would have hit us.
that's what I'm questioning. I don't think they are because there's no way the face that we see could really be hit by an asteroid from our perspective because the Earth is in the way. You see, the other side, the dark side, could be. I could understand that, but
The
not
bad
our
side,
side.
I mean, the dark side is quite light a lot of the time. That's when we're seeing a dark side. But we always see the same side of the moon. And the reason for that is because the rotational period
Huh.
of the moon exactly equals its
Which,
revolutional period.
which is
Well, Patrick,
interesting,
we
isn't
have a
it?
caller.
It is indeed.
Yeah.
Rodrigo,
Hey,
Hello.
Rodrigo, how are you?
hello. What are your thoughts here?
On the moon. Very
Yeah.
different to probably a lot of people. I come under the impression that the moon was placed there by the Draconians using some technology, but this is from the work of Stuart Swerdlow. I don't know if you guys know of him. But yeah, it was placed there, supposedly inhabited by different beings ready to attack. But that hasn't happened yet. Hopefully, it won't. Interesting perspective, but I'm
So,
open-minded with that sort of stuff.
do you have any comments or thoughts on the passing of Edgar Mitchell and what he's contributed to the UFO?
I just found out about it from listening to
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
So that's
Terrible.
yeah, it
I mean,
seems like a
he
lot
lived
of
a full life, but
mm, mm, absolutely. Yeah, I don't have any thoughts on that. I haven't pondered on it, so no apologies.
no, that's all right. I mean, it was rather sudden. Scruffy, you wanted to kick in something on the moon.
Well, Wingman, I think you've got a bit of a point there. But as Lanita said, there's obviously been many strikes on Earth that we've had over the course of time that have hit us. Not a whole lot up to date that we can fully recall that have hit the moon. There's small evidence of fragments that are thought to hit the moon, but honestly, I don't see it being a huge contributor to taking in the hits that would hit Earth. And as you said, Wingman, its gravity isn't nearly as strong as the Earth. So that being said, it wouldn't really pull into many asteroids. Although, like some of the other planets, it does affect their course. So if it, depending on the angle, as you said again, it can veer them off a little bit, but not nearly enough to miss Earth. Although I think in the past, during the solar system was in much more of a disarray, the moon during its formation might have taken quite a bombardment, assuming that it was there, because as Lanita said,
There's some cultures that say that the moon has not always been there.
Exactly.
So.
And I one argument to support that the moon hasn't always been there that I've often thought to myself is the sheer coincidence of the moon exactly tapping the sun during a solar eclipse. And that's always, every time I've seen that, every time. The one time I've seen that and been in the spot of a solar eclipse is I've just thought this is just too good to be true. I mean, the sun being that size and the right distance away, and the moon being that size and the right distance away, and us being, all these are things adding up to cause that event, profound event. I just, it does make you wonder that is the moon a satellite that's been kind of towed in, maybe for the purpose of facilitating the creation of organic life or human life or animal life on Earth, and maybe the Earth wouldn't have worked without it. I mean, I don't know how important the moon is to well, not only the tides, but even to some extent the female aspect of the species, because there must be a reason why women's menstrual cycles are tied into the cycles of the moon, and does that mean it's an important factor, and how is it important? What part does it play? So these are things to consider as well.
All women have different cycles, so I don't know how well they're tied into the cycles of the moon. I do know that when there's a full moon, people tend to get a little bit crazy in general.
And that's where the term lunatic comes from. Lunatic.
Lunatic, yeah, exactly.
Mm.
I mean, there's been lots of cultures that actually worship the moon, and Diana, the goddess of the moon, which, interestingly enough, Princess Diana, when she passed away, and this was something I was told a couple of years ago, actually, by someone who knew a little bit about things, said that where she died, where she crashed, was actually over an old, I guess, worship site, an old temple to Diana, the goddess of the moon. So, in their opinion, she was not, her death was not accidental, that it was actually a sacrifice.
Form of ritual of some sort. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. So that's very roundabout, but very, very interesting to say the least. It's got me thinking, as he's talking about the moon, about that megastructure that they found around that star recently. And actually, just like yesterday or the day before, space.com came out with another article about it, saying that it's probably not likely to be asteroids or anything like that, like they thought. I guess further research is showing that their original theories are just kind of falling short. The star, which has been nicknamed Tabby Star after it was discovered by Tabitha Boyahan, made big headlines in October. But now the astronomers who have probed the star's behavior over the past century by looking at old photographic plates. Not only does the star's random dipping date back more than a century, but it has also been gradually dimming over that time period. And a second constant that makes it even harder to explain. The first signs of the star's oddity came from NASA's planet hunting Kepler space telescope, which continually monitored the star, as well as 10,000 others, between 2009 and 2013. But they've been going through this, saying that, well, maybe the dimming is from an asteroid belt or something like this, but they said it's been so sporadic and it's been increasing in its size, and the intervals are just completely irregular. There's no evidence whatsoever that they have that could validate the idea that it's simply, some sort of meteor showers that are, causing it or anything like that. So the more that they get into this, the more research that they're doing, the more that they keep, I guess, leaning towards the fact that this could possibly be something that is intelligently designed by, a vast intelligence beyond our planet. They don't know what the purpose of it is quite yet, but they're definitely they've ruled out a lot of things that they originally tried to use to explain it away. So now what we have left is, now we got to try to figure out what it is that's circling that star, why it's there. But in the end, I think the most important thing here is that they're really just kind of saying that, we think that extraterrestrials built something intelligent around a star.
Possibly.
Which is quite unusual for the scientific community to be proposing. Really, I'm surprised they're even going there.
Well, I know. I think that's the thing. I mean, when you look at this, you've got to understand how much they try to avoid this, and now they're actually they're just really forced. They really don't have anything left but to say, you know what, this might actually be proof that we're not alone. So
And
that's
just that
really...
thought, sorry
Yeah.
to interrupt. Just that thought, that people seem to be blasé about it. Like, they haven't picked this up before. Like, oh, they're actually
Right?
assuming that now alien civilization's out there, but everyone's like, we sort of knew anyway. So like this, I've heard prominent figures saying, that we couldn't handle the truth if we found out about what was really happening. But I think we've got
I think
the
we're proving that we can.
yeah, exactly. Just the blasé aspect of thinking about it.
Yeah, like
sort of proves-
nobody's really all that excited about it. It's like
I
people
know,
are just
exactly.
like,
Yeah, just another
like,
thing.
you know,
Okay, next.
it's like Twilight Zone,
Mm,
You expect when they finally come forward and say, yeah, this is probably extraterrestrial, people would be at least reacting, but it's like they're still not reacting. I just don't get it. It's
too
so
much fluoride in the water.
anti-Semitic. Well, maybe, we've been talking about disclosure for so many years now.
Yeah.
And maybe all of these shows in the media have been priming people up so that they're ready for disclosure when it comes. And so they do react blasé when it happens so that it's not a big jolt, so that they don't
Right.
freak out over it. So maybe it actually worked.
It's happening that way, doesn't it? Seems like it is happening that way.
It
Yeah.
really does. I mean, things are starting to come to a point, where it's getting more clear. More documents are being released every day that they just can't hide anymore. The CIA, the FBI, all these files that talk about, visitors, not only extraterrestrial visitors, but extra dimensional visitors. And they describe them in great detail in these documents that have had to be declassified. And the funny thing is that nobody picks it up because the mass media is greatly controlled. But even those who do, their voices aren't getting out there enough, and people don't realize that the truth has already been revealed. It's already been exposed, and yet everybody's blind to it now. It's like they don't even care, or they just, it's maybe they're just zombified. I don't know.
So, like, how long till official documentation or classified documents are released? Is it every 50 years?
50 years. Yeah.
50 years. So 2051, we'll find out about September 11.
Right?
I think we already know.
We already know.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Just need confirmation and validation.
People who aren't completely asleep know, I guess, is what you could say. I think, talked about this before, but everyone, I mean, anybody with any amount of knowledge about the way buildings go down, pilots, everyone has said that it just doesn't add up. It just doesn't make sense, and it couldn't have happened the way that they're saying it happened. Gosh, you go down.
One thing I find interesting. Sorry for interrupting. I think there's a bit of lag.
No, go.
Yeah, one thing I find interesting is like there's a lot of videos of the planes, but from official cameras and whatnot. But I've not seen one from the ground view. Like you've seen after the fact, as the buildings start to collapse. But I've not seen any videos of the planes from the ground.
There's actually
interesting.
There's actually only one.
Okay.
There's this guy. You see his right profile, and you got a shot looking up to the building. But I actually think I'm not sure about the first plane. It might well have been a genuine plane. I don't believe this hologram nonsense. I mean, I don't know where that came from. It's such.
Yeah, I don't think it's hologram.
No,
either.
I don't believe that either.
But the reason for the hologram theory was because of the second plane, the footage from the second plane, alleged plane, and there were kind of anomalies with regards to the undercarriage of the plane. Now, what I think's happened, and this is the best kind of hypothesis I've come up with. The actual live footage from one of the news channels of the second plane, or the second explosion, should I say? There was no plane. There was an orb. There was actually an orb. It was an orb. It was definitely not a plane that approached the building at quite a steep angle, about a 45-degree angle, and then an explosion occurred. It was obviously not a plane, nowhere near the size of a plane, but just rather this strange orb that just came out of the sky, and you could see it. And the videos are out there. You could see it approaching, and then all of a sudden, the same video comes out with a plane in it. that doesn't have the background.
Superimposed.
Yeah,
Like
you know, the
superimposed over the
background's been
top.
taken out. It's slightly zoomed in, but it's exactly the same footage. I've seen the two compared, and then one has this orb coming in, and the next one, which I don't trust because the background's gone, has this plane in it. So the footage with regards to the anomaly, you know, of the undercarriage of the second plane, I think is because the plane has been superimposed over the orb. So what we're seeing with regards to the anomaly is actually the orb still in the picture. I don't know what the orb could be, but certainly the angle was very strange with regards to the plane. You know, the 45-degree angle. And, you know, I do trust the initial first footage that came out before any doctoring could have taken place, which was simply of an orb that was many times, because was it 737 is about a kind of about nearly half the width of the building, or at least a third of the width of the building. This thing was only a fraction of the width of the building. So, you know, it does raise questions as to what kind of technology is out there. What, you know, who authorized it? And, you know, I'm adamant. I'm just given the footage that, yes, the footage of the second plane hitting the towers was all doctored. You know, all of it. Because there are very few eyewitnesses that claim to have seen it, and you know those could easily have been planted there in the vicinity. Of course, everyone saw the explosion, but very few actually saw a plane. You know, or those that did, like I say, could have been COINTELPRO, call them what you want. So yeah, very interesting, and very tragic, of course, at the same time.
Has
Well,
anyone?
you know,
So,
go ahead.
so you go first, Lane. Okay, so
Okay.
I was just thinking there's some recordings, you know, from people on the ground floor, but wouldn't there be a loud noise if there was a plane coming down at that height? I don't recall anyone saying about the sound of engines or anything that were at that level. Does that make sense? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, like I said, there is one footage with the plane noise of the second plane, and the first one for that matter. But I don't trust, like I said, I don't trust the second plane footage and the noise from that. And also, there was an engine found in the street, but it doesn't match the 737. It's a much smaller engine, and it's just sitting there, and there's no kind of impact where it's on the ground. You know, they taped it off. There's no impact crater on the ground, and it's just kind of there, like it's just appeared. Very strange.
Well, you want to know what's really, really strange is the fact that BBC reported World Trade Center 7 falling before it actually fell. On the video, you see them going in the background to live footage where they're talking about how Tower 7 has gone down, but it's still in the background during the reporter talking in the footage.
I remember that. That has been explained away,
Of course.
sort of convincingly, but you never know. Having to do with just a picture of what it was supposed to look.
You know, when they mess up something that grand of a scale, they've got to come up with some sort of reasoning and excuse.
I'm not for or against. I just wanted to add that in.
How did they reason that away?
Had to do with a green screen and or the fact that they were just, since she was in England, they just put up a picture of the building, you know.
Yeah,
I forget exactly, you know, but it made sense on the face of it. Not that I bought it, but
I guess
the darndest.
I guess the only way to prove that, I haven't seen what the timestamp was of the news report, but I mean, I think Building 7 is obvious that was a demolition for sure. Even Silverstein admitted that in an interview, and he said that, you know, they had to pull in his expression, a term of demolition, a building, taking down a building. And he said that on camera. So, you know, and also the other thing with regards to the Twin Towers, I don't know if you guys know, but there was this whole palaver about an asbestos problem with it. And, you know.
Now, that's something I'd never heard.
Yeah, no, I can't remember the exact details, but there was real problems that they would have had to do a major revamp of the inside of the building due to an asbestos problem. And as a result of that, the buildings they was all sold off at bottom dollar. Silverstein bought it up, insured it at top dollar, And then, of course, the events of 9/11 happened, you know?
Mm-hmm. That's very convenient. So very interesting. You know, one of the things that I could never reconcile, and I think it's one of the things that bothered me the most around that entire event was when Bush was informed about what had happened. You know, this is an unprecedented event. We haven't had anything that had happened similar to that since Pearl Harbor, literally. You know, um, and he's sitting in there in a classroom reading a storybook to people, and you know, one of his men come up and they whisper in his ear and inform him, and he sits there and he nods his head and he continues for another good 10 minutes or more to read this storybook before he goes and takes care of this terrorist attack on our soil. Um, as the leader of the free world, I don't care what you're doing. You excuse yourself when your country is being attacked and you act immediately. You say, I'm sorry, something very important has come up. I have to excuse myself. You know, these people will take care of it or whatever, and excuse yourself and go take care of it. You don't sit there for 10 minutes and read a story. And he just nodded his head very calmly. To me, it almost looked as if he was being confirmed, you know, like he was being told something that he already knew was happening and he was just getting confirmed, is what it looked like to me, the way he nodded his head like that. Just there was no sign. Now, of course, you don't want to show panic, you know, but a person that's actually finding out something like that for the first time, I'm sorry, but there's going to be indications in your face of some sort of concern. There's going to be an uncontrollable furrow of the brow, even if for the briefest moment, before you gain your composure, when you're being told something of that level of seriousness on your own soil, which is completely unprecedented. You're just not going to have that composure for at least a few seconds, because it's going to hit you and you have to respond. You have, you know, human instincts. You have to respond in a certain way. Your body just automatically, when the concern hits you, will show that to some extent before you have a chance to go back and get composure over yourself, to kind of hide it for the face, you know, to show to everybody else. So the whole incident to me looked very much like it was planned, and he was just being told it's happened, it's been done, it's over now, you know, and now we can do this. It was just the way that whole thing happened. It never set right with me. It never felt genuine. And the fact that he lied about where he was when he heard it was another one of those things that just kind of set off big old alarm bells in my head. So that's my 2 cents on it.
Wasn't he holding the book upside down as well, supposedly? I
I
don't know.
think so.
Yeah. In the,
What's
in
that?
the
Who's that? Bush, you mean, during the.
Bush, yeah.
George
I'm not
Bush.
sure.
You mean at the
Yeah.
school thing? Is that what you're on about?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
Oh, what? Plane hit steel kite? No, kite? Oh, what were the words?
My
Yeah, something
Pet
like that.
Goat.
Huh?
That was the name of the book, was My Pet Goat.
Oh, right. Oh, interesting that is, yeah.
Or the story in the book. I think it was.
Oh, no, was it plane? Oh, let me see. Bush.
There was something about a kite
Kite
in it, though.
hits
Yes.
steel.
Yeah.
Let me see exactly. This is what the kids. Which, all right, here we go. Look, I mean, this reminds me of some sort of ritual. Just as it's happening, the kids are chanting, "Kite, hit, steel, plane, must."
I remember that back when it first happened. I know that there were forums where they were talking about, you know, the story and what was happening, and it is almost like there was like a channeling, like a ritual type of thing, you know, where you have people putting power into words to make something happen. Very,
Yeah.
very, very suspicious.
Isn't it?
Yeah, honestly. One of those things, I don't even know how we went down this road tonight, because
Yeah, what happened
boy,
with Zach Bagans?
yeah, oh, Zach Baggins. Well, first, before we get into Zach Baggins, I want to go into a story that I found. This was on strangerdimensions.com, and it's a little bit of an older story, but it's about some experiences that people have been having kind of related somewhat because they're all having a similar experience with Ouija boards. In every reported encounter with this entity that's known as Zozo, Z-O-Z-O, there's a single common thread, which is darkness. To communicate with Zozo via Ouija board, it is said to invite an unrelenting demonic force into your life. But what is Zozo? Why has it terrorized thousands of people around the world? This is not an easy question to answer. The first report of his appearance occurred in 1816 when a young girl in Picardy, France, fell victim to a severe demonic possession. And according to Dictionnaire Infernal, published in 1818 by Jacques-Colin de Plancy, she became the vessel for a number of demons, one of which was the mysterious Zozo. Later, when Ouija boards entered the popular culture in the 20th century, stories of Zozo began to rise, with numerous tales told of the Ouija spirit, the one that devours souls and changes lives. So Zozo is a complicated entity, or so it would seem. In most stories, it's initially friendly, sometimes using a different name. Occasionally, it will appear in the middle of a conversation with another spirit and interrupt the communication. This is really creeping me out, guys. The planchet performs strange figure eights and inverted Z's. Now, if you guys remember my experiences, if you guys remember me sharing them before, this is actually very similar to something that happened to me, but this spirit was not called Zozo, but it did interrupt communication with another spirit, and the figure eights thing started happening. This was all on a night where something really extraordinary happened. But going back to the Zozo story, so it either does figure eights or inverted Z's, and the answers become repetitive. Wow. It doesn't take long for an encounter with Zozo to turn frighteningly negative, which also happened in my experience. It's difficult to tell which stories about Zozo are authentic and which ones are nothing more than urban legends. Some tell of murders and suicides, others involve possession, physical ailments, abuse, curses, other phenomena commonly associated with the demonic forces. Some have even claimed that Zozo attached to them or their family, like a parasitic demon. The following are a handful of excerpts from stories about Zozo that appear throughout the internet. Perhaps they'll give us a better idea of what it's like to summon them into your life. Okay, one story. This comes from ghost-space.com. It was her father who had passed. We were testing the spirit, asking questions that only she knew the answers to. After 20 minutes, it switched over and claimed to be my mother, once again answering questions correctly. We were both in tears, and before we knew it, the spirit switched over and we asked who we were talking to. The pointer went O-Z-O-Z-O-Z-O. We called him Oz. We asked him to blow out a candle to prove himself, and before we completed the sentence, the candle was out. We asked him the time. Neither of us had watches and had been outside for over an hour, and we ran inside to look. It was exactly right to the minute. He then proceeded to tell us that it was him the whole time, not her father and not my mother. Him. He said he knew what we were thinking, and that's how he gave us the answers to our questions. He was in our heads. That's creepy. Yeah, very creepy. Okay, another story comes from a Yahoo Answers reply, which says, Ouija board possible Zozo possession? ? Saturday night, my friend and I did the Ouija board. We used a red candle, and the spirit we spoke to claimed she was Zozo. My friend started complaining of a headache, so we stopped. That night she slept-walked for the first time in her life into my sister's room and started talking some gibberish, screamed red, and started with the gibberish again. She then left the room and could not be found in the house for a good half hour. We searched, and when we returned to my room for about the fourth time, she was there. And yet another instance, we sat at a table and put our hands on the cursor and moved it clockwise around the board as we said Ouija out loud 3 times. Apparently that's the new way they do it. I don't know. My friends weren't avid believers in the paranormal or using the board for rumors that they'd heard. So I asked, is there anyone there? The cursor moved slowly to yes. Who are we speaking with? The cursor repeatedly went from Z to O and continued to do so. After the question was asked, what do you want? It quickly spelled out, her. Who is her? I asked. It spelled out my friend's name and I was freaked. What do you want with her? It spelled out, I want her, very quickly. The cursor returned to moving from the Z to O yet again, and I was getting annoyed with this because it really wouldn't tell me why it wanted my friend. It just spelled out, I want her, repeatedly. My friend, the one the demon wanted, stupidly called him apparently a naughty word of some kind. It's all bleeped out. And the board spelled out death. Then things got bad, but they don't say what happened after that. This goes on and on. There are actually a very large number of these experiences of people sharing their experiences with this same entity through the board. I mean, there's literally like 5 more of these. So the question now, is Zozo a demon? I suppose your first question will be, is Zozo even real? But for now, it's better to concentrate on the stories told and leave the skepticism to others. At any rate, not everyone believes Zozo is a demon. Instead, there's a theory that Zozo is in fact nothing more than an evil spirit pretending to be a demon. After all, there's no reason to believe that ghosts or other strange entities must tell the truth. They don't have to play by any rules. It's actually known that spirits using Ouijas usually lie. So that's really nothing new. And that is the most curious thing. In most communications with Zozo, the planchet on the board makes a repetitive movement through the alphabet from Z to O and back again over and over, as shared in the experience quoted above. But this could be a problem for those using a Ouija board. You see, it's said that you shouldn't go backwards in the alphabet or in the numbers on the board. Why? Because doing so is a method that demons and evil spirits use to open portals into our world and break through from the other side. Could the name Zozo actually be a trick? That's curious. Taking inspiration from the stories of Zozo, a horror film titled I Am Zozo was released in 2012. The film was shot entirely on a Super 8, but unfortunately its reception, according to Wikipedia, was overwhelmingly negative. Movies aside, while reading about Zozo, the writer of the article couldn't help but think of the final possibility. Could Zozo be a tulpa, a shared experience, like the Philadelphia experience or the Philip experiment on a much grander scale? The countless stories shared of Slender Man and Zozo could be of our own creation. Tulpas, I mean, the idea of the tulpa is, it makes sense here. If people put enough energy into something, if enough people believe in something, I mean, they say that's how gods are created historically. So the question goes out to the users, out there, listeners, if any of you have ever experienced, the Zozo entity, what are your experiences with it? You guys are welcome, as always, to call in and share your experiences. But guys, what do you think about this entity? This is something, I guess it goes back a very, very long way. And apparently, Zozo is actually a demon. It actually is the name of a demon that you can find. I'm trying to find what the name of the book is that has the list of different demons, but Zozo is apparently a demon. So is it a spirit playing at being a demon? What's happening here that so many different people are having experiences with the same entity? I will say that the entity that I had the experience with was not called Zozo, but it did start with a Z. So I don't know what to think.
Maybe you spelled it wrong.
Well, no, it was Zur. So it was Z-U-R.
So the R could have been trying to spell another word. No, or
I don't know. No, because we had contacted this one repeatedly. And the thing is, and here's the thing, like with Zozo, the thing that freaked us out about it was this was back when I was in high school, and I was talking to a guy who was not a friend with the girls that I had been using the board with completely different circles of people. So he didn't know any of them. So there was no way he could have known this. But he said that he and his friends had been using a Ouija and that they'd been in contact with a specific spirit. And I said, "Oh, what's the name of yours? Because we've been talking to one too." And he said, "Zur." I said, "How do you spell that?" And he's Zur. And so I explained to him that we had also been in contact with this spirit. And I said, "We live in the same town. I don't know if it's like a local spirit, but the name is not a typical, name of an average person that's passed over. Zur is not a name I've heard anybody's first or last name, that I've ever heard of." So that was one of those things that we also had, we were communicating with the same spirit, even though, we were completely separate groups of people. So it was very, very odd. And sadly, we were stupid and we continued until we had an instance like what they described where we were talking to Zur. And then another spirit came in that said that Zur was bad. And this spirit was GD, that just gave us initials. And there's been people that have suggested, of course, that it was God. But basically, there was a battle that kind of went on between the two spirits on who got to talk to us. And during this course of this, the planchette was doing figure eights all over the board. And it wouldn't stop until finally one of them emerged, and unfortunately it was Zur. And at which point, it basically said that it was going to hurt one of us before morning. And it started moving off. And here's the weird thing, guys. Okay, before I get into this, we weren't using a traditional board that night because the one that we normally used was at a different friend's house than the one we were at. So we didn't have a board there. So we made one out of paper and wrote all, the alphabet and the numbers and the yes and the no, the hello and goodbye. We wrote all that down on paper. So we made it ourselves, and we used one of those little glass heart-shaped dishes that you'd use to like put gum in or something, very small, but it was clear and see-through. So we used that as the planchette. Well, after it made this threat, the planchette thing started moving off the paper across carpet, at which point we lifted our hands off of it and it kept moving. My friend grabbed it and threw it out the window, and then we burned the board, and then we sat up all night back to back in a circle, scared to death, but thankfully all of us lived through the night. I don't know if burning it was the best idea. People have said that burning it's a bad idea, but we survived. So yeah. Now, in reference to this, there's the story about Zach Baggins. Apparently, he purchased a house that they had investigated on their show Ghost Hunters. The house was dubbed the Demon House, and the reports that the host had purchased it in early 2014. Then he proceeded to have it knocked down 2 weeks ago. He planned to create a documentary detailing the Demon House and all of its oddities. Apparently what made the house so unsettling was that all the residents had reported all kinds of strange things that included levitation, people being thrown into the wall by unseen things. So, I mean, whatever the entity was in that house, it was pretty violent and pretty powerful. So I fully understand, being a person that is dedicated to helping people, I can understand why he bought the house and why he demolished the house. Apparently he did film a documentary there before he demolished the house. My only thoughts on this is I hope nobody builds another residential type of structure over that place ever. Hopefully he keeps that land now that he's got it, doesn't sell it to anyone, so nobody has the opportunity to make another building there, because it's probably the land that is got the spirit in it and not just the house itself. Usually that's the way it goes. So if they were to build another dwelling over that land, they're just going to have another spirit or entity there. So I think the best thing to do is for him to keep that land and not allow anyone to build anything there. Nothing. I'd actually put a fence around it, honestly. What are your thoughts on that, guys?
Yeah, it's not a bad idea. If the house has been there and has been able to be the stage of so many happenings, well, that could definitely amplify things, it would seem to me. It could. I can't say for sure or not, but I would think so because they've had a chance to romp and, develop their muscles.
Yep. Yep. The thing that I worry about is, that whatever this entity is, I worry that it's not limited to just that small parcel of land, you know? So my concern would be that it might just kind of leach over into some of the other houses. I hope that doesn't happen, but it could. You take away, its habitation and it might look for a new place to roam,
And the parcel of land could have been bigger and not
Mm-hmm.
had a shape that fit at all the houses that are over it. Parts of it might be under one or two of the other houses, or it might be under several. You really have no way of knowing where it, a place of burial or something. That's kind of hard to figure out sometimes.
Yeah, spirits don't really have any concept of property lines, so
Oh,
they're not going to really respect. It's like, oh, well, this is this guy's little property line, so I guess I'll stay right inside these little confines because they have legal ownership of this, but somebody else owns that, so I should probably not venture. No, they're not. They don't have any concept of that.
no, but they may be bound by, say, a burial area or something like that. Then again,
That could be.
but
That could definitely be.
the two just probably don't match up at all.
You know what I find the interesting thing is I don't see a name attached here anywhere to the entity. It doesn't look like they ever actually got a name out of it, and that's somewhat disturbing because if it was actually a demon, you can't get rid of it until you've actually identified it, which means this thing is probably still existing in that area in some form. So that's not a good thing.
Well, did Bagans just have the thing knocked down before he even got around to doing a show because something happened that scared him so bad he decided to go ahead and do that?
It looks like he actually finished filming before he knocked it down.
Okay, well then you might think that he did in fact make an attempt to identify it.
Yeah.
Without having
And who knows, maybe it's just that, he wants to wait to release it until the documentary comes out,
Yeah, all for added excitement and everything. To gin up some fear on people's parts, get them hanging
Yep.
off the cliff.
It looks like we lost Rodrigo on that one.
He couldn't speak to the
So
top.
that's not exactly up his alley.
No.
I don't know. Did we lose Wingman too?
His picture's still here.
No,
Okay.
no, I'm here.
All right, you're still there. Any thoughts on that whole that demon house thing with Zach Baggins?
No, I can't really relate to it, to be honest. So it's quite hard for
Yeah.
me to say anything on it or comment on it. But there's enough of these stories, especially with the Ouija stuff. I mean, yeah, there's enough stories to make you think something's going on. But even really, at the end of the day, even the people doing it can't entirely be sure unless you get stuff flying around the room and stuff like that, which again are stories that you hear about with regards to Ouija. But on the house itself, no, I can't really relate to it, so it's hard to say,
Yeah, I understand. Now, is the Ouija similar? Because I know this is a sensitive subject for you, but is it similar to the spirit box at all? Wingman?
No, I don't think it is. I don't know why I say that.
I know about Ouija boards. I've messed with them when I was a kid.
Yeah, but spirit boxes are different, and that's
Yeah.
what I'm wondering what your thoughts are on Wingman and what the nature of those things are and how they differ from the Ouija.
I mean, I've seen and witnessed incredible success of communication attempts with regards to the spirit box or the ghost box they call it, and there's different kind of versions of it, if you like, versions of use of it, and it does invoke some sort of communication, and it has involved communication at a lot of these haunted shows where they use it. So, so with regards to the ghosts being able to communicate them with the crew there via the spirit box, then that's also been possible or witnessed. And
So it is a form of communication.
yeah, and the replies are very logical with regards to the questions that have been asked of the spirits there. So it is a form of communication, um, probably more reliable than a Ouija board. I don't know, but certainly I would prefer, in terms of integrity, the response of a spirit box than the Ouija board, because there's other people there involved that have their hands on the glass. So you can never really tell who's doing what.
I ain't pushing it. No, I ain't pushing it.
Yeah, exactly. No, you are. Yes, you are. No, no, I'm not. Yeah, yeah, you are. I'm
Yeah.
sure of it. And so there's that doubt. Um,
I have to say, I remember we've used the spirit box a time or two before, and I didn't have the feeling of negativity that you get when you're using a Ouija. So I think with that, we're gonna close the show. So, be it Ouija boards, spirit boxes, I think that the spirit box is possibly the better option if you want to try to communicate with something beyond yourself. Thank you, everyone, for listening tonight to Anomalous Realities. And don't forget to like us on Facebook, facebook.com/Anomalous Realities. Have a wonderful evening, everyone. Good night.
Bye.
good night.